We are recording the webinar. The recording and a copy of the presentation will be made available online. So just keep an eye on our weekly digest article to come out either this week or next week with all of the links. And I'd like to welcome Dr. Bonnie Dodds and Tara Pidborochinsky from the Medically at-Risk Driver Center at the U of A, who are here to present today for us. So I'll hand it over to Dr. Dodds.
There we go. Thank you, Kelly. Good afternoon, everyone. To begin with, thank you all for joining us on the webinar today on alternate transportation for seniors. We'd like to thank AUMA for facilitating the session. We also would like to, and I'm just trying to get my screen to come up so that we are on the PowerPoint. Oh, there we go. So now that I do have the slide up, so the webinar this afternoon is on the Transportation Toolkit that we have developed to assist communities in rural and urban Alberta implement or expand their alternate transportation services for seniors. We'd also like to acknowledge funding for the development of the toolkit from the Ministry of Seniors and Housing, and we'd also like to convey special thanks to our advisory committee and for the workshop attendees who participated in workshops across Alberta last fall for their valuable input into this toolkit. Their questions and observations and suggestions have made the toolkit a much better toolkit. So to start with, we want to talk, or first off, go through the goals, what our overall goals were in developing the toolkit. And those goals were to provide communities, as I mentioned earlier, in rural and urban areas of Alberta with resources needed for the successful development and implementation of sustainable, responsive models of alternate transportation services for seniors. We also have as goal to create capacity in the development or expansion of ATS services in rural and urban Alberta. Currently, there are approximately 200 ATS service providers in the province providing service to 153 communities. Because of these service providers, many seniors are able to get to medical appointments, shop for groceries, and attend social activities in their communities. However, 3 out of 4 communities, 60%, are without transportation services. And we know from our research, as well as others' research, that seniors living in rural areas are particularly disadvantaged in terms of transportation service provision. In a recent study that we did for the Capital Region Board, which involved surveying over 2,000 adult children, senior drivers, senior non-drivers, and persons with disabilities, we found that senior non-drivers and persons with disabilities were particularly transportation disadvantaged. That is, seniors, we found in this study that was just released to the Capital Region Board, that senior non-drivers have more than a 4-fold increase in unmet transportation needs compared to seniors who drive. And persons with disabilities have more than double unmet transportation needs than senior non-drivers. There also was a trend, not surprisingly, for seniors and persons with disabilities living in rural areas to have more unmet transportation needs than those living in urban centers. These data and results from other studies that we've done in the past really underscore the reason and the need for more transportation services for seniors and persons with disabilities in our province. How did we develop the toolkit? First, we searched the literature and reviewed the published literature and reports. We then utilized the results and learnings from our own projects. We engaged stakeholders and received input, and this was a really important and valuable step in the development of the toolkit. And we engaged community members via interactive workshops, as noted previously. On the slide that you see on the screen now are some of the initiatives that we've conducted at the MARD Center on alternate transportation for seniors. And 3 of those initiatives that have been particularly helpful in informing us on how to develop or the resources that are needed to implement alternate transportation for seniors in the communities was first our collaboration with Wainwright and District Handyman Society. So in 2013 we conducted a community needs assessment for Wainwright, and I believe that we have the chair of the Wainwright and District Handyman Society on the webinar today. It really is a model of alternate transportation service provision that has made a difference in the community. The Wainwright and District Handyman Society launched their service August 6, 2013, and they were giving about 20 rides a month, and they're now giving close to 200 rides a month to seniors and persons with disabilities in their community. And I always remind myself when I think about the change in these statistics is that the 200 and some seniors that they're providing transportation services to now, those aren't seniors who just recently moved into the community. Those are seniors who were living in the community that had unmet transportation needs. We also, as I mentioned, the Capital Region Board Transportation Needs Assessments, and there were 2 of those. They have provided us with valuable information on not only the unmet transportation needs, but some of the ways that we might develop solutions to address those unmet needs. For the toolkit, we have it consists of 6 sections. The first 3 sections help to build the foundation of an ATS service, with the last 3 sections focused on launching and building the sustainability of the service. In the first part of this webinar, we'll discuss the first 3 sections and then move on and give a brief overview of what's in sections 4, 5, and 6. So let's turn now and look at the material in the first 3 sections: getting started, developing and then implementing a project plan, and conducting a community transportation needs assessment. In terms of getting started, this involves gathering basic information on the need for transportation services and the resources that are currently available in the community. Some of the components that we have in the toolkit is the importance of identifying key contacts, how to compile the information, and importantly, sharing the results not only with your stakeholders but with the community in general. And that involves holding an initial community-based meeting and also in terms of developing a project plan. Let's look at how to conduct a preliminary needs assessment, or an overview of that. Information that we have in the toolkit includes links to important statistics that you will need in terms of identifying the demographics, so the percentage of seniors, the other strategies that can inform on perhaps what you're looking at in your community, the importance of having town hall meetings, asking some of the targeted questions, and as I mentioned earlier, identifying key contacts. What are some of the advantages of a preliminary needs assessment? And interestingly, of the 6 workshops that we did last fall throughout the province, many of the stakeholders that attended the workshops, when we asked about whether they had conducted a preliminary needs assessment, the vast majority identified that they had not, but after attending the workshop, recognized the importance of collating or identified some of this information. So some of the advantages of a preliminary needs assessment is, first, it helps you to demonstrate the magnitude of the problem. Often what we've heard from stakeholders is that they understand that there is a need, or they perceive or think that there's a need for transportation services in the community, but they really don't have a good sense of how many seniors in their community do have unmet transportation needs. Certainly, doing a preliminary needs assessment helps you to start right from the get-go, identify some of the priorities for your service. It also helps to establish credibility. It's far more powerful to develop a service in your community by having reached out and had conversations and feedback from the stakeholders or the people who are going to use your service, as opposed to just assuming that you know what they need. The other major advantage of doing a preliminary needs assessment is it creates awareness of the need for changes in the community, and it also promotes community engagement. Another really important component of getting started is to create a project plan. And one of the things that I think that most of us know is that people don't plan to fail, but they fail to plan. Some of the advantages of a project plan is it will provide direction for developing the service, it will help you to stay focused, and it also serves as an excellent communication tool going forward. And again, we have lots of great information on how to develop or start creating the project plan in the toolkit. Other content that we have in Section 2 is developing an organizational structure, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute, and the importance of developing a vision statement, a mission statement, identifying specific objectives very early in the process, developing strategies to meet your goals, and then developing an action plan. On this slide, you'll see that we have information on an organizational structure and then registering and incorporating your organization. With the more than 150 stakeholders, probably close to 200 stakeholders that we've talked to through the process of developing this toolkit, this was one of the areas that was identified as one of the priority areas of need. So if you've decided, you've done a preliminary needs assessment, there's clear need for transportation services or for the initiation of a transportation service in the community, then what type of organizational structure are you going to need in order to move that initiative forward? And some of the options that are available to organizations for communities is to develop a steering committee, an advisory board, a board of directors, or working boards. And the selection, how you would select or which organizational structure you select for your organization, the advantages and disadvantages and a description of each is in the toolkit. The other area that was often identified or frequently identified as being very important was whether to register or incorporate the organization either as a society, a nonprofit organization, and a charitable organization. Based on our experience, there's a lot of great information on each of these types of organizations on the web, but it's very difficult often to find or to wade through. So again, the information that we have in the toolkit provides you with the web links and an overview that makes the job of trying to decide how you're going to set up your organization a lot easier. In Section 2 of the toolkit, we also talk about the importance of vision statements and mission statements. So why would you want to develop a vision statement for your transportation initiative? There's many benefits. First off, vision statements will define not only what you do, but also why you are doing it. And vision statements should be broad, short, inspiring, and uplifting. And we've provided examples of vision statements from some very successful organizations in Canada and internationally. So for the Alzheimer's Society of Canada, as you can see, the vision statement is very short, but it's very clear. Our vision is a world without Alzheimer's disease. Habitat for Humanity, a world where everyone has a decent place to live. We've provided some examples of vision and mission statements in the toolkit, and you can take these vision and mission statements and adapt them for your own purpose. So to us it seemed like a good starting point would be, our vision is a community that meets the transportation needs of its seniors. And the accompanying mission statement for that: to provide responsive and affordable transportation service for seniors in our community as a means of enhancing their access to services and overall quality of life. One of the real advantages of vision and mission statements is, again, it provides you with clear direction, but you can start using it as a marketing tool. The vision and mission statements also allow you to start making policies, or help you to think about making policies regarding your service. So the mission statement: to provide responsive and affordable transportation service for seniors in our community, you may want to broaden that if you've identified persons with disabilities as a very important sector. The other thing that the mission statement does is that, as I mentioned, allow you to start developing policies. So are you going to provide the service during the day, during the evening, during weekdays, on weekends? So they just simply serve as a really important and fundamental starting point. The remaining two sections of Section 2 of the toolkit are developing strategies and developing an action plan. And in the interest of time, we don't have the time to be able to go through and describe these in detail, but they are well articulated in the toolkit, and we encourage you to look at those. Section 3 of the toolkit is devoted to how to conduct a community transportation needs assessment. And we've outlined the 6 basic steps to conducting a needs assessment in the toolkit, as well as the benefits of a needs assessment. The 6 basic steps include identifying the need, generating the goals, identifying your target population, selecting your methodology and collecting the data, analyzing the data and generating a report, and then disseminating and implementing your findings. What are some of the benefits of conducting a needs assessment? First off, it allows you, or promotes, a greater understanding of the transportation needs of seniors in your community. At some level, I think that we all have a fairly good idea of what the transportation needs of seniors are in communities in rural and urban Alberta. However, having said that, no two communities are alike, so it's really important to tailor your service to the needs of seniors in your community. A transportation needs assessment also provides information on the unmet transportation needs. Do the seniors in your community have difficulty accessing medical services within their community? Or are the needs primarily in terms of accessing medical services outside the community? Do seniors in your community have difficulty getting their groceries? Is going to social events in the community important to the seniors? Asking those questions allows you to tailor your service to their needs. Conducting a transportation needs assessment also demonstrates your commitment to your target population, to other stakeholders, and to the community at large. And once you've conducted the transportation needs assessment, those results can be pretty powerful in your communication strategy going forward. We recognize that communities in rural and urban Alberta likely, first off, don't have the resources to conduct a transportation needs assessment, and also they may not have the skill set. To assist communities in rural and urban Alberta with the community transportation needs assessment, we at the MARD Centre are going to be doing a provincial transportation needs assessment over the next year and a half. And we plan on taking the results from the provincial needs assessment and posting the results on our website on a regional basis. What that means is that every community in urban and rural Alberta will have access to results of the transportation needs of seniors in their region. And what that means is that there may be a need to have a community hall meeting or to have an initiative at the local level to further define, but having the results from a regional transportation needs assessment, we think will really facilitate your progress in implementing services in your community, albeit with those results at a regional basis. So you can watch for those results for next year. In working with your community partners, this slide provides an overview of some of the questions that you may want to ask when you hold your town hall meeting or when you start having conversations with organizations or with stakeholders. So getting started, did you do a preliminary needs assessment? If yes, were there groups you included that weren't identified? Who are your most important key contacts? So these questions or this template will help you in moving forward. Okay, let's now go and look at the overview of the material in sections 4 to 6 of the toolkit. The last 3 sections focus on developing and successfully launching your service. So now you found out that seniors and perhaps persons with disabilities in your community have indicated that there is a need for an alternate transportation service. How do you develop that, and then how do you launch it? And once you've launched your service, how do you receive feedback, or should you receive feedback? What's the importance, and what are the benefits of evaluating your transportation service? And then the last section of the toolkit, which is an incredibly important section, is how do you build a sustainable transportation service? We know from previous experience and from talking with service providers is that sometimes the service gets initiated in the community and it's meeting the needs of seniors, but the individuals that are involved with it either get burnt out or there's a lack of funding and the service falls by the wayside. And that's something I think that all of us wish not to see. So thinking about sustainability of your transportation service from the get-go is really important towards building the sustainability of that service. So in the 4th section of the toolkit, and you've likely identified by now that we have all the sections of the toolkit color-coded. So this is our blue section. Developing and successfully launching your transportation service, selecting the type of service, and determining how that service will be delivered. I'm going to go into a little bit more detail on that in a minute. Attending to the operational aspects of your ATS service, the importance of developing a policy manual. Interestingly, again, in the workshops that we had in the fall throughout Alberta, the vast majority of service providers that attended the workshops hadn't developed a policy manual. And after going through this section of the toolkit, we received very positive feedback saying this is a great section, and we understand that having a policy manual will really facilitate our day-to-day operations. We also have a section on managing the ongoing day-to-day operations of ATS service, how to launch the service, and then how to respond to challenges. So let's talk now a little bit about some of the primary considerations in selecting the type of ATS service that you want to deliver. And what we heard, again, from the vast majority of stakeholders who attended our workshops was selection of the vehicle or the vehicles was really important. So are you going to deliver the service in a private vehicle, or a handyman, or a bus, or a combination of vehicles? If you elect to deliver the service in a private vehicle, are you going to use paid drivers or volunteer drivers? And what are the advantages and what are the disadvantages of each of those? What are the policy considerations in terms of volunteer drivers versus paid drivers? And again, we have all of this information or links to information that inform on these really important decisions in the toolkit. We also heard from many of the stakeholders that insurance issues is a complex area and one that is not well understood. So we have a section in the toolkit on insurance issues that walk you through some of those considerations. We also have, we think, really valuable information, and based on feedback from organizations, information that, again, is difficult to find on safety inspections, commercial vehicle regulations, that type of thing. So I mentioned just a minute ago in terms of drivers, whether you're going to have paid drivers, volunteer drivers, or a combination. And the decision that you make in terms of your drivers has implications for insurance requirements. And we have partnered with the Insurance Bureau of Canada and to articulate what the insurance requirements are related to both your drivers and to the organization. And again, the feedback from service providers to us has indicated that this has been really valuable information, that it's in one place. In terms of developing a policy manual for your service, again, this is something that is not something that we just all have a skill set for. It requires some expertise. So we've talked about the development of organizational culture and policies in the toolkit, the role of procedures and forms, the importance of developing, at least on a fundamental level, some workplace guidelines. And these workplace guidelines include employment policies and status and records, and the employee payroll and benefits if you do have a paid driver, and also employee conduct. And just as an example of the importance of having a policy manual, if you have developed an alternate transportation service in the community and you have a paid driver and you haven't developed a policy manual in terms of when the rides will be provided, it may be that your paid driver will receive a call at 8:30 on a Saturday night from an individual that there's a need for medical transportation from a rural area into Edmonton. Your service provision is from 8 to 6, Monday to Friday, and from 12 to 2 on weekends. And this falls outside of those parameters. Unless you have a policy manual and unless you've conveyed that policy to your employee, to your driver, then it makes the situation far more difficult. So there's many benefits to having clear policies regarding not only your service but the requirements of your driver. Managing the ongoing day-to-day operations of your service. What we've heard from many service providers is that they spend so much energy and time getting the service up and running, fundraising, paying attention to how the service is going to be delivered. There's lots of considerations and lots of work that's needed in terms of trying to decide what type of vehicle and purchasing the vehicle and fundraising, that managing the day-to-day operations kind of goes by the wayside. But thinking about how you're going to manage the day-to-day operations of the service is really important from the get-go. One of the things that we can't emphasize enough is the importance of documentation. So document, document, document. Having a really strong board steering committee is essential. Having a support network is advantageous. The other thing that we talk about, and we have some tips and mechanisms to help in terms of launching the service, is you've worked so hard for likely months and months and months. And so once you're ready to deliver the service in your community, tell the world. Hold an open house, invite the media, invite your all of the individuals who have been strong supporters. Make sure that you have your municipal leaders, you have your mayor and your member of parliament and your MLA and anyone else that can help you going forward, and that's important in terms of recognition to help you celebrate in your success. And then the other area that we cover in this toolkit is how to respond to challenges. It doesn't matter how well you have planned and how well you have thought things through, there always will be challenges that arise, and it's important that you identify and respond to those in a timely manner. One of our, I think, important, I was going to say greatest learnings, but we had so many great learnings from Wainwright that I'm not sure it was the greatest, but one of the great learnings from Wainwright was how important it is to have diversity of board members. So having different skill sets of members of your board will pay dividends time and again going forward. So making sure that you have board diversity will be really helpful. The other thing that we've learned along the way is that it doesn't matter how well you have organized and planned and worked through things, that there will be successes, but there will always be challenges, and how you overcome them and address them will be really important. We know that for almost any initiative, there's often setbacks, or there's things that go wrong. So if there have been things that have gone wrong, tell the community and let them know how you're addressing it. Because, for example, it could be that you have someone that's called in for a ride and there was a mix-up in schedules and the ride wasn't delivered. And if you don't tell and if you don't respond to that untoward event, most often it's the case that the person that it happened to will tell the world. So you better tell the world and talk about how you've addressed it. And then the importance of receiving feedback. Again, many of the service providers that we've talked to don't have a formal process for getting feedback in terms of whether the service is working, whether it's you're providing the rides in a timely manner, and whether you're taking people places that they want to go. So we have a section in the toolkit in terms of how to receive feedback, and we've included some sample feedback forms. We also talk about the importance of formally evaluating your service, and this could be at a 6-month or a year, and then every year thereafter, and using the learnings from that feedback to modify and or improve your service. And again, communicating outcomes. It could be that every year, once you've collected the data, that you have another town hall meeting, or you engage the media and get articles written in the paper, and let the world know your successes and what you plan to do going forward. Here are some of the advantages of receiving feedback. First, it helps to identify deficiencies. It allows you to identify the strengths. It allows you to make adjustments to your service, and it helps you to identify unmet needs. You may hear from the clients that use your service that they have transportation needs to some places that you hadn't thought about. And if you can accommodate those needs, then that goes a long ways towards increasing their transportation mobility. There's different methods for receiving feedback, and this is a really important consideration, particularly in a small rural community, in that you may have a form to fill out, and if you had the drop box in the vehicle, but you're only giving 2 or 3 rides a day, then it's going to be pretty easy for the person if they filled out the card and dropped it into the drop box in the vehicle. So it's helpful to have, first off, anonymous comment cards, but also the provision for those comment cards to be placed in a box somewhere outside of the service provider. So you may want to set up a drop box at the local drugstore, and people can provide comments. And it suggests to me, or indicates, that you likely will get more completed forms, and if things do need improving, that your riders may be more open to providing that type of information. You can also use formal questionnaires. A really important source of feedback on your service is from the driver, because the clients that are using the service often will have conversations with the driver. You can also receive feedback through phone calls, letters, and emails, and it's really important that you document those, but confidentiality is also of utmost importance. Here's an example of a feedback card, and for any service organization that's on the webinar today or throughout the province, if you wish to take and copy this, we'd be delighted. So Section 6 is the section that everyone thinks about, or I think hopefully thinks about when they first start off, but again, there's just so many things to do at the beginning, and there's so many activities and work to get the service launched that this often goes by the wayside. But thinking about the sustainability of your transportation service from the get-go is important. There's different considerations in terms of sustainability. Fundraising is always difficult, developing or collecting the funds to not only start the service but maintain the service. What types of marketing strategies will help you as you go forward? We talk in the toolkit about the importance of fostering collaborations and partnerships, the importance of promoting community engagement and leadership, and we have a section on how to ensure organizational stability, and then some information on conducting an internal review. So let's talk a little bit about fundraising. Unfortunately, there are not many grants targeted or available to building or to for funding an alternate transportation service for seniors in the province. But we do have links to some of the granting agencies that do provide money. We also talk about the importance of going outside of the granting stream and looking at sponsorships, either in corporate or in kind, and we give examples in the toolkit of these types of funding sources. We also have some suggestions in terms of fundraising events, whether it's silent auctions or community events. And again, we know that there's unfortunately not a lot of funds available, not a lot of granting agencies or places that you can apply to, but we know from our experience that there are a number of, in fact many, alternate transportation services for seniors in the province that have been successful and are working and or are sustainable. So learning from each other will help us as we move forward. If you're fortunate, if you're in a rural area and if you're fortunate to have a TV and radio station, for sure use that resource. Local newspapers, they can become really important and are really important friends towards your service. Posters and newsletters also are a source of marketing. One of the things that's interesting is that if you look at recent Statistics Canada data, seniors are the fastest growing segment of the population in terms of technology, and it's around 50% of seniors 65 and older now use technology. So I think that this, to me, is an exciting opportunity for us to move forward and engage the population that you wish to provide service to. It may be that some of your clients may not be on the internet or may not be web savvy, but they likely have a son or a daughter. So moving your service in this direction, I think, will pay dividends in the long run. One of the things that I've become more convinced about over the years working in this area is that one of the ways to build a sustainable transportation service is to look at regional delivery of the services. Certainly we know that there are many communities in Alberta that need transportation services for seniors, and every community would like to have their own transportation service, but we also know that the sustainability or viability of those services is difficult. So collaboration at the regional level, I think, is particularly important, particularly because often the transportation service that you provide will take you through the communities in your region. So particularly for medical transportation outside the community, in our transportation needs assessments, that's one of the services that often is identified as being a priority. And I'm going to use Wainwright as an example just because I know the area so well. So if Wainwright is coming into Edmonton for medical transportation service and they're going by AUMA and they're coming through Toefield, and maybe that's a little bit outside the region, but there may be other people in the region that also can be accommodated, and having 6 people in your handy van or 10 people in the handy van is far more cost efficient and provides transportation to more disadvantaged people than having one person in the handy van. Local businesses, service organizations, and local media are really important in terms of collaboration and partnership. And again, being present at community events, parades, rodeos, fall suppers, that just provides you with the opportunity to not only showcase your service, but also increase the visibility of the service. Promoting community engagement and leadership takes time and efforts, but it yields many benefits. And again, we have a section in the toolkit in terms of how you can facilitate that engagement and leadership. And this is just a summary of some of the things that, some of the questions in each of the areas that you will want to pay attention to as you work through either developing your service, enhancing your service, or I guess developing or enhancing. So as a summary, the toolkit for implementation of alternate transportation for seniors, it's available at no charge. We have both a paper and a web-based toolkit. On the web we have, and the toolkit's available on the MARD website, www.mard.ualberta.ca. We have both a PDF version of the toolkit as well as a flippable toolkit. And the whole goal is to create capacity in the development or expansion of ATS services and to foster a community of practice. And I want to talk a little bit about that community of practice in a minute. But before that, I want to also talk about a pre-conference workshop that we're doing on the toolkit the day before the Gray Matters Conference in Grand Prairie, which is September 20th to the 21st. So we'll be holding an interactive workshop on implementing enhancing transportation for seniors in your community. It'll be Monday, September 19th in the Pomeroy Hotel and Conference Center, which is the conference center for Gray Matters. And we have the link to the registration for the pre-conference on the overhead. So we would love to have you sign up and to see you at the pre-conference workshop. One of the exciting components of the pre-conference workshop is we're going to have 6 hubs set up for the workshop, and people can rotate through the hubs, and we will have experts in each of the areas that you can talk to. So we have individuals from the Insurance Bureau of Canada. We have people from Service Alberta and Carrier Services of Alberta. We're going to have a hub where we're going to do senior-friendly training. We have a toolkit where we'll simulate some of the changes in cognitive, sensory, or motor functions of seniors, and that allows you and perhaps your driver to understand some of the challenges that seniors have, and that better understanding, or that understanding, will allow you to better meet their needs. And then in terms of the community of practice, we envision this community of practice as a virtual community of practice consisting of a web-based collaborative environment for communicating, connecting, and conducting community activities with opportunities for face-to-face meetings. So the goals of our virtual community of practice are to capture and disseminate existing knowledge and practices, to stimulate learning amongst our community members, to connect stakeholders who may not otherwise have the opportunity to connect, to provide a shared context for people to communicate and share information in a way that builds understanding, and to enable the development of a self-sustaining partnership in this area. So for any of you that are on our webinar today, if you're interested in becoming members of our community of practice, you can send us an email at mard@ualberta.ca. And I'm going to stop there now, and we will use the last 15 minutes of the webinar to respond to questions that have come in through the chat option.
Sure. So we have one question from Judy, and she says, you've done a needs analysis for our area in general with CRB, which I'm going to guess is the Capital Region Board. Should we do one as a town? How, in your opinion, is the best way to do this? Phone or door-to-door, or another suggestion? And are we reaching out to only current seniors or to future seniors? And if this is to be an intermunicipality initiative, should each town, village, and rural area do their own and then compile the data? Would questions on needs analysis look the same whether it is a town, a village, or a rural community?
Yeah, good. Judy, thank you very much for your thoughtful question. In terms of the first question, should you do a needs assessment as a town? As I understand it, I believe that you're interested in looking at service that would be at the regional level. And so my sense is that you could use the results from the Capital Region Needs Assessment as a starting point, and then as a committee or whoever's on your board or whatever structure that you set up for the initiative that you're planning, you could review those results and then make some decisions in terms of whether that those data, those results provide you with a pretty solid starting point, or whether there may be some intricacies or initiatives that you're thinking about related to your transportation service that may need some outreach to the community. So I think that initially I would encourage you to first look at the results from the Capital Region Transportation Needs Assessment, and then start having some conversations with your committee members. We're happy, Tara and I are happy to have conversations or to join in that if we can help in any way in terms of interpretation of the results, the generalizability of the results, and then you could make a decision going forward.
Okay, thanks very much. So I can see there's a couple of people, it looks like they're typing in some more questions or comments, so we'll just give them a couple minutes there for those to come up.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, there is a question about whether you can print the PowerPoint or whether it will be available via email. We'll send the PowerPoint out via email.
Okay, so there's a comment from Judy saying that not all of their area was part of the CRB. So would that significantly change the needed analysis that was done?
Sorry, say that. I don't see that comment. Oh, okay. I guess, Judy, what I'd need to know in order to answer the question is what areas that you're looking at and whether the demographics, the population density of those areas differ significantly from the areas that we did include in the needs assessment. Yeah, so in our Judy, in our needs assessment, we did do all of Lamont County. Yeah, and we did include Andrew. So there's a question. In a region, there is a number of varying needs, so it almost seems we need to look at what service could meet the largest percentage of the needs. And I agree that there's, first off, as a service provider, you're never going to be able to be everything to everyone. You're not going to be able to meet everyone's transportation needs. And because resources often are limited, that's one of the values, real values, of having a needs assessment, having data, is you can then design your program on what people have told you are their greatest needs, and that may not make everyone in the community happy, but at least it's defensible, and that you're developing your service based on results And as much as you would like to meet the needs, transportation needs of everyone, there simply aren't enough resources that will allow you to do that. So what you'd like to do is to meet the transportation needs for the greatest number of seniors and perhaps persons with disabilities. I'm not sure what population you want to serve, but you want to meet the greatest number of needs, the needs for the greatest percentage of the population. So in terms of partnering, so there's a question. So from your experience, is it a viable option to partner with more than one partner in a county where there are 5 or 6 municipalities involved? Any time you can partner, or for the most, if you can partner broadly, there's advantages, and particularly I would say in terms of transportation in rural areas, because you're often traveling through the different areas to go from point A to point B. But I think that it depends on the makeup of the regions, the willingness for the other municipalities to partner, and developing a common understanding and having common goals, and that everybody's on board. But it's certainly worth looking at from the get-go, because we know from previous experience, and when we look at literature in other areas, and when we look at the data that we've collected over the years on transportation service providers throughout the province, is that small individual community-based initiatives, often it's just really hard to sustain that type of service. Yeah, so there's another question in terms of if there's private services already in the market and in use but cannot meet all the needs, are there opportunities, or would it be beneficial to have a P3 arrangement? And again, I think that P3s can work in some regions, some communities, and they may not work in others, and it depends who's at the table. You might have a better idea of that than I do in terms of your region.
Okay, does anyone have any more questions or comments? We'll just wait a couple more minutes. Oh, here we go. Can you from Carol Lynn, can you offer any suggestions for using a subsidized payment system?
Can you clarify for me what you mean by subsidized payment system? Is that where the organization, the service provider, pays, supports it, but the user pays a fee? Or just waiting to get a comment back? One of the things I will tell you that based on a provincial transportation needs assessment that we did in 2009, that wasn't as specific as the one that we've just done for the Capital Region, and then that we've done in for the Capital Region, we asked seniors and persons with disabilities how much they could afford to pay, and then how much they are willing to pay for a one-way ride. And those results are really interesting in that typically what we found is that people can afford to pay and are willing to pay about the same amount. The one result that we had, and this was in the sub-region of the Capital Region Board, that persons with disabilities indicated that they were willing to pay more for transportation than they could afford to pay, which speaks to their unmet transportation needs. If your question is regarding subsidized payment system, yeah, so users would pay a fee. The municipality could subsidize, or users would get a voucher based on, I think, so users would pay a fee, the municipality could subsidize, or users could get vouchers based on their income. Any of those, the blended model certainly works. Again, what we found is that seniors do not expect to have these transportation services provided free of charge. Having said that, it's often the case that their economic circumstances are such that they're not able to pay the full cost of what the ride costs. So setting up your system or your service such that the user pays a fee that's within their means, and then it's subsidized either through grants or through municipal funding, which would be nice, is needed. And it's also the case that there always will be seniors or individuals in the community that need the service that can't afford to pay for the service. And service providers that can factor this into their business model, I think, is really important. And that's where corporate sponsorships or fundraising helps, that the very economic challenged seniors can use the service, have those services provided at no charge, with the monies coming from an outside source.
Okay, we've got another question from Carl. So the question always seems to arise that the bus must have wheelchair capacity, which limits the bus capacity and usually requires a person to assist at each end of ride. In your experience, do wheelchair-bound folks typically use the bus service regularly, or do they seek other transportation?
I don't know the answer to that question. I think that based on my understanding of communities that have buses with wheelchair capacity, first off, there's dozens, if not more, of handy vans or buses that accommodate wheelchairs throughout the province that are underutilized, and somehow or other we need to figure out a way to free those up so that they can provide transportation for seniors. The other is, I guess it depends on the makeup of your community. If you do have people in the community or in the region or your service area that you know are wheelchair dependent, then it seems like it would be efficient to go ahead and buy a wheelchair equipped van or a wheelchair equipped bus. Having said that, there's also opportunities to use that bus for transportation of people outside those that have wheelchairs. Again, I think having information on who's going to use the service in your community will help you to make the decision. So if you have one person that needs a wheelchair accessible vehicle, but you have 6 seniors that need transportation in a vehicle that doesn't require wheelchair accessible vehicle, then it probably makes more sense to move towards something that is not wheelchair accessible.
Okay, we'll just wait. Oh, I've got a comment from Carl again. I'm worried that survey results, especially in the county, may have been skewed, as the folks that could no longer function highly enough to drive themselves probably would have left the area, thereby not having them respond to the survey. Is that a possibility?
Yeah. So this is a question about our Capital Region Transportation Needs Assessment. I don't think that our results are skewed in that even though we had a higher percentage of seniors who drove, we did have a relatively good sample of seniors who did not drive, and the results from those senior non-drivers were pretty cohesive. What those results say to me is that the results that we received from senior non-drivers and persons with disabilities in the Capital Region Board survey are likely pretty representative of senior non-drivers. That's the only other question I might ask is in terms of whether you're asking whether the needs of senior non-drivers, if you looked at those results at a regional level as opposed to at the capital region, the one region level. And we haven't looked at the data across the subregions. So for many of you that aren't familiar with the Capital Region Transportation Needs Assessment, we sampled individuals, adult children, senior non-drivers, and persons with disabilities in all of the subregions of the Capital Region. But we chose to present our results for the Capital Region overall, in that if we start partitioning the results by sub-region, our sample sizes become so small that we wouldn't have confidence in the data at the sub-region level. And we wouldn't have confidence in the data just because the sample sizes are too small. So we have a question. Do we have a feel as to what level of service for fee was number one, and what fee would be reasonably able to be paid for by seniors? So the seniors indicated that they, on average, they were willing to pay about $9 for a one-way ride, and they could afford to pay about $9 for a one-way ride. And persons with disabilities, their responses were pretty consistent as well. They indicated they could pay a little bit more than $10 for a one-way ride, and they were willing and could afford to pay that amount. Yeah. And for those of you on the webinar today, we've been talking a lot about the Capital Region Transportation Needs Assessment. We just presented the results to the Capital Region Board on Thursday. So there's a process involved in terms of releasing the report, but we anticipate that that report will be released and will be available broadly to anyone throughout the province or anyone interested in it. So if you're interested in accessing that report, it will soon be on the Capital Region Board website as well as the MARD website. So there's a question in terms of trends, again, the results from the Capital Region Board Needs Assessment in terms of service into the metropolitan core, which was Edmonton, and I'm not quite sure I understand the question. Yeah. So in terms of the need for transportation services for seniors and persons with disabilities in the capital region, we asked about whether they needed service for medical transportation in the community, medical transportation outside the community, for getting groceries, for attending social activities, and for attending religious activities in the community. And interestingly, most of the majority of individuals with unmet transportation needs indicated that those unmet transportation needs were unrelated to medical transportation per se, and so that they needed it for getting groceries, needs for shopping, for social activities, and that's consistent with results that we found in other needs assessments, in that often if a senior is unable to drive themselves and they need transportation, the sons or daughters or someone in the community will make sure that they have their medical transportation needs met. On the other hand, well, they'll say, you know, Mom, Dad, I can take the day off work, I can take the morning off work to give you a ride to the doctor or get you in to see the specialist in Edmonton, but I can't take time off work to take you grocery shopping or to take you to the rodeo or to take you to the bingo that's happening on Wednesday afternoon. So interestingly, the majority of unmet transportation needs of both seniors and persons with disabilities were outside the medical transportation.
Okay, and then we had a follow-up question which is asking about the destination of choice. So I don't know if this was asked in the CRV survey, but do you have any information on the destination of choice, and was that generally going into the downtown Edmonton region?
Not necessarily. However, one of the interesting patterns of results from our needs assessment was that persons with disabilities living in what we identified as the metropolitan core or the city of Edmonton had higher unmet transportation needs than persons with disabilities living in St. Albert, Sherwood Park, or then the remaining subregions, the geographic areas, the outlying areas of the capital region. And our interpretation of those data are that persons with disabilities who live in the city of Edmonton likely have higher levels of disability, and they've moved into the central core because of that, the higher level of disability. And if they have a higher level of disability, they likely have more unmet transportation needs, so there may be a greater need to attend more medical appointments or for rehab services or for specialized appointments. And it also may be that if more people with disabilities, with severe disability, are moving into the central core, then they're likely putting more demand on the DAT service, which also may result in more unmet transportation needs.
Okay, we've got a couple people just typing in some more comments or questions. There's another one. Are you aware of any new grants or funds available from the provincial or federal governments?
Yeah. No, to our knowledge, there's been no new funding initiatives that have been posted. And if there are, we will let you know. We all can wish there will be. So I think it looks like that's all the questions. Again, it looks like there's still some writing going on, so that's great. So one of the questions is, have we had any correspondence with the province regarding the need? And yes, we certainly have. So we've done a policy brief and or an update, and we also are aware of and try to keep our leaders aware of the activities that we're doing at MARD. And the need for transportation in this area. Unless anyone has
another question, what we'd like to do is to thank each of you for taking the time.
Out of what we know are busy schedules for attending the webinar. We encourage you to access our toolkit either online, or if you want
send us an email,
paper copy, send us an email, and we can mail you out the paper-based version of the toolkit. And then if we can help in any way, if you have questions going forward, or if there's new information, we will disseminate it as broadly as
thank you very much, and we look forward to having you as part of our community of practice,
having you as part of our community of practice,
learn together
for us to
as we go
learn together as we go forward in making more responsive and more available transportation for seniors available
Thank you very much.
In the province. Thank you very much.
And I'd just like to add to that and thank Bonnie and Tara for coming down today and taking time out of their schedule to talk about this toolkit. It's a great toolkit. It's very in-depth. It's free. It's really helpful, and they're definitely open to assisting you guys if you're looking to set up some kind of age-friendly transit in your area. So this slide's just some upcoming webinars. We also have our Mayor's Caucus this week and then the convention in October. So if you're looking for information on how to register for these webinars, go to www.auma.ca/events. And whatever event you're interested in, click on that, and that will get you to Eventbrite so you can register. And we look forward to speaking with you again. Have a great day. Thanks.